Thank you, Kevin, for organizing this and so ably chairing the PCI community calls. I'm really glad today that we're hosting Bastian Zaini, who is our first PCI fellow from Indonesia. Bastian and I actually met through our joint connection with Wolfgang Fengler, who's on the call. And Wolfgang is the co-founder of World Data Labs. And we are really pleased to have supported Bastian's work in Indonesia on the Internet Inequality Index. So that Bastian joined us as a fellow, particularly to concentrate on that. But also he'll make some remarks about the SME financing project that we've been exploring in Indonesia. Bastian has spent many years with the World Bank and is really distinguished in working as an economist with the various departments in Indonesia. And we look forward to a long and ongoing relationship. So with that, I want to turn it over to Bastian. But with Bastian, Bastian, you'll be sharing your presentation, right? And after,
yes,
I also want to invite Wolfgang to perhaps make some remarks once you start to talk about the Internet Inequality Index. And so this was a project that was funded at the World Data Labs by the Internet Society. Bastian, I notice your network bandwidth is low. And so if you have trouble later on, I will prepare myself so I can share screen so that your bandwidth can be concentrated on your voice and your video.
Okay. Okay, I already shared the latest presentation on the chat, in the chat. So
yeah,
everyone can have access to the presentation. Okay, so should I start or?
Yes,
please do.
Go ahead, Bastian.
Okay, okay, hold on. Okay, I hope, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, it's looking good.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Here in I'm in Jakarta right now in Indonesia. It's almost 10:30 at night. So I'll try to make this very hopefully quick and painless, because this the presentation will show quite a lot of charts, but I'll try to go through them very quickly. So I'm also part of the World Data Lab, and at PCI I'm the international fellow, and one of my main task is to develop the Internet Inequality Index for Indonesia. And the background why we do this, because as we know, nowadays a lot of things are moving into digital, and one of the biggest question probably, how do we measure one of the social economic indicators, the inequality in the digital era? If it stay using the same, traditional benchmark, or how can we expand it? And one of the key things that was developed, yeah, and this was launched 2 months ago by World Data Lab, is the Internet Poverty Index. And basically, the Internet Poverty Index is to provide a picture of how the new definition poverty across all countries in the world. And for detailed presentation on that, I think Wolfgang or I can share the presentation on that. So I'll just go through briefly. So basically, what World Data Lab developed is the Internet Poverty Index, which is expand the new definition of poverty. So it's not only the traditional aspects such as food, clothes, or housing or shelter, but also how do we include one of the probably the biggest needs right now, which is the access to internet. Um, this is something that is developed, I think, through last year in World Data Lab. So how my work with the PCI connect with that is that World Data Lab, they provide the Internet Poverty Index at the global scale, at the national level. And what I try to do in PCI is apply that and create a similar, probably a complementary index at the subnational level for Indonesia. So this is sort of like a study case for Indonesia, and if it's works well, then there's possibility of expanding this to other countries where they have, inequalities across subnational governments within that country. So just briefly on the Internet Poverty Index, basically we the index is trying to see how many people are living in internet poverty, and the findings from that, the main findings that we can see that around 1.4 billion people, or almost 20%, exactly 18% of the world population are living in internet poverty. Um, in Africa, it's 709 million people, and in Asia, it's in total 457 million people. And this uh, can be classified into regions, and we can see how the distribution of the internet poor. Um, the biggest is probably the obvious one is in Africa, which is in terms of people, number of people, the absolute number, and also in terms of the relative number, they're pretty big. For instance, 709 million people in Africa. That's in terms of the internet poverty, but in absolute poverty, it's much smaller, which is 442. More than half of the people in Africa are actually internet. So if we, from the distribution among regions, World Data Lab create the ranking of the number of people, the internet poor in the world. And as you can see, the highest one is in Nigeria and India, with more than 100 million people in each of the countries. And if you scroll down, you can see that in Indonesia, there's around 44 million people. That's 44 out of currently 267 or almost 70 people. That's more than maybe around roughly around 20%. No, yeah, around that number is internet poor in Indonesia. While at the poverty level, if we compare that with the absolute poverty number in Indonesia, the current number is just below 10%. That's the number after the pandemic. So what does it mean for Indonesia? How can we translate what is shown by the Internet Poverty Index, and how can we apply that in Indonesia? So this is basically the main work that I do for PCI, try to develop this. But however, before we go into the serious stuff, I'll try to give a quick background on Indonesia, probably some facts about it, about the country. It's a massive country, basically for number four most populated country in the world. Currently over 17,000 island in the country, and in terms of coastline, second to Canada with over 57,000 kilometers of coastline. And we are currently have the G20 presidency because at the latest number, it's the 16th biggest economy in the world. Um, Well, on the other side, we are, well, rich. It's a rich country, but maybe not in the financial term, probably more richness in terms of characteristics or maybe diversity, because we have over 700 ethnicity across the country. And that affects, they have different local dialects, they have different cultures, and also different food. And probably if you hear more about Indonesia, the buzzwords that usually you hear is probably Bali. That's basically the gateway to Indonesia's tourism. Uh, you also have heard about the Komodo dragon, probably the only place where you have wild Komodo dragon alive in the world. and and social media. We're pretty big on social media, Indonesia, and probably in some cases uh, notoriously famous in terms of the social media. How the Indonesian people use social media to, you know, do all this, yeah, probably not so positive things, but you can see that in the news or in the media and do the search yourself. Now, more to more serious stuff. So before I do the Inequality Index for Indonesia, I actually did a study for Google Indonesia on the impact of the digital economy uh, for Indonesia. How much does transitioning the economy more into digital impacted our country? And for instance, the total contribution of the digital economy to Indonesia, in especially the GDP numbers, is around USD 56.4 billion or 5.5% of the GDP. This is estimated using the input-output table for Indonesia, and see how are the sectors that is utilizing digital technology or digital approach are impacting uh, the economy in terms of the multiplier effects. And uh, this is also a positive things in terms of the digital economy in Indonesia. It's actually it's empowering. It's empowering in terms of gender. More female are more included in the economic activities because of the digital economy. They have more access in terms of the regions. Eastern part of Indonesia, which is quite lagging compared to the western part of Indonesia, is also involved in the economic activities, more involved, and also in terms of the poorer population, the poorest 40% of the population, they are also involved in terms of the economic activities in Indonesia. Um, this is the number that is produced by a survey that we did in 2018. This is a survey that we do for Google, and the survey is done. Actually, we did it by piggybacking a political survey to see, in terms of the political survey just before the election. So this is pretty much cover across the country and give us sort of like a brief overview in terms of the digital economy impact to the Indonesians. And why this is happening? Because we can also see that in terms of the access to internet, in the last 5 years, it has been increasing across the country. Sure, if you see on the left side, which is the highest one is the DKI Jakarta, that's our capital city, and Yogyakarta is also quite big in terms of the internet access. But if you, as you go further to the right side, you can see that some regions, which is mostly remote regions like West Sulawesi, North Maluku, East Nusa Tenggara, and Papua, even though the numbers are smaller, but they are also increasing. So we can see that across the country there is increased internet usage in the last 5 years. And if we, when we try to do this according to the spending groups, you can see that uh, the bottom lines are actually the poorest 20% of the population. They are also experiencing increasing access to internet. However, in terms of the rate of increase from 2012 to 2016 for the poorest 20%, the increase is almost sixfold, from 3% in 2012 to 18% in 2018. And this is the highest increase compared to the other spending groups in Indonesia. So on this background of information, uh, we I try to with Maylins and also the team at the World Data Lab and also Wolfgang, try to develop how we can actually apply the Internet Poverty Index for Indonesia, and we try to do this at the subnational level. We have the data set. However, the data set may not be as complete as what the World Data Lab has at the global level. So we try to do a simplified application of the Internet Poverty Index to give a snapshot of Indonesia. And this is a collaborative work. When I developed the index, discussions between PCI and also the data team at the World Data Lab happens. And the idea is to create maybe, well, ideally it should be the same, should be uh, full application of the Internet Poverty Index at the subnational level, but due to the availability of data, we try to do something that can complement the Internet Poverty Index. So here, based on the data that we have, we are more focused on the affordability pillar. So for the Internet Inequality Index, there are three aspects that I measure. We have the usage, and this is based on the social economic survey that the statistic agency in Indonesia do every year. So in terms of usage, the percentage of people using internet in the last month in each of the province and districts. In terms of affordability, we define affordability as people who spend 10% or less of its monthly spending for internet or mobile in each of the province and districts. And from that, from the usage numbers and the affordability numbers, we came up with the inclusion gap. So the difference between the usage and the affordability rate. So we will have for the inclusion gap, we'll have a positive number if the rate of usage is bigger compared to the rate of the affordability, but negative if the rate of usage is smaller compared to affordability. Probably just to make this simple, uh, the number of positive inclusion gap means that the number of people using internet is bigger than the people that can actually afford internet, but negative if the usage is smaller compared the number of people that can afford internet. So this is actually quite interesting because it gives you an idea of in terms of the market for internet. Has it been utilized fully, or maybe there's still some space that can that is potential for digital economy to grow into. Now, from this, the Internet Inequality Index, I will not go to the result in terms of ranking of the provinces and districts, but I will try to give you a picture on how it is distributed in Indonesia. So, in general, internet usage is still limited to people for people living under poverty. So you can see that in terms of the indicators here, the access to internet for the poor people, on average, 1 of 10 poor people use internet in the last month. And how do we define poor people? This is by using the poverty line, where in Indonesia the poverty line is measured by the consumption of how much do you spend for a consumption of 2,100 kilocalorie. So that's is converted to monetary value, and from that we have people who actually spend less than that falls into poverty. And as you can see, both in the left side is the map at the provincial level, and on the right side is at the district level. We can see that as you move towards the right side of the country, the eastern part of the country, the poor access to internet is getting less and less. And at the district level, it can be seen that at the more detailed level, that that the area which is very dark red is basically the remote area in Papua, or maybe remote area in Kalimantan, and some parts in east. This is East Nusa Tenggara, and this is North Maluku. This is very remote, and in terms of the infrastructure for this area is actually quite limited. Even though our president right now is uh, pushing infrastructure development more towards this region right now, and that's probably one of the reason why uh, currently the main debate in the country is moving the capital city from Jakarta, which is here in Java Island, to somewhere in East Kalimantan, in Kalimantan. That's one of the way to sort of how to stimulate economic growth for the eastern part of Indonesia. From that, from the Internet Inequality Index for Indonesia, the main message now is still less than half of the Indonesians still use internet. This is the district average for the whole country is actually only 43%. So more than half of the people still doesn't use internet in Indonesia for various reasons. Um, and as you can see that the areas that is, as you go towards the right side of the country, you can see lots of area are very dark red, and this is for instance like in Papua, and this is basically these areas are very remote and mountainous area and very indigenous people in Papua. So not only they don't have access, but probably also internet access probably not one of the important things that they have in mind for the people in this area. Uh, Interestingly, if we go from the affordability indicators that I developed, most of the the internet spending is less than 10% from their total spending. So they can afford internet. Uh, and this is if you combine these two indicators together, it will be very quite interesting because there will be places where people that can afford but actually doesn't use internet. So that's also explain why less than half of the Indonesian are still doesn't use internet, because uh, some are still in the traditional mindset. They do, economic activity directly, most probably without using financial services, cash basis, and stuff like that. And so this is how the numbers for at the district level in Indonesia it spreads. It's quite even between the western part of Indonesia and the eastern part of Indonesia. Um, so uh, the affordability is not affected by the fact that the development is more advanced in the western part or more lagging at the eastern part of Indonesia. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I try to see people that use internet, who use internet and can afford it, meaning that they use internet, but their spending for internet then is less than 10% of their total spending. So it's pretty much uh, when we combined it with use internet but cannot afford, only 3% of people who use internet cannot afford it. This is the average for the whole country, and also pretty much the same from eastern part of Indonesia and to western part of Indonesia, only for several regions. Uh, the area in Papua, I think this is Membera Moraya, quite remote, and also some part in south part of Kalimantan. So these people, uh, the number of people that is spending more than 10% to use internet is actually quite low in Indonesia. Only 3% that that is spending more than 10% of the total spending for internet. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, more than half that can afford internet doesn't actually use it. So the average number for the district is more than half is people who can actually afford but doesn't use internet in the last 3 months. So so this is actually quite interesting, but still uh, there is still some areas that I have to inspect more. Why this is happening? Uh, why people that can actually afford on the in the spending spectrum on the upper side of the spending spectrum, but doesn't actually use the internet. Probably, maybe what I can think of is because some of the areas we are still very traditional. Uh, uh, Even people doesn't have access to the internet infrastructure, or maybe they don't feel that they need to be using internet, not yet. Uh, but this is actually the picture from the data that I have. And the number gets quite a lot in Papua. Even though they are remote, they can afford it, but they don't use it because probably they are not exposed to needs, or maybe activities that utilize the internet. So when we try to see the combine this number together and to see it from the inclusion gap, you can see that the inclusion gap for the average for all districts in Indonesia is minus 52%. So there are uh, more than half of the people who can afford internet but still doesn't use the internet. So this is the uh, if we're talking from business point of view, these are actually our market where we can actually sell, you know, uh, things that utilize internet that they can probably bought into. And as you can see, still these are the challenge are areas which is quite remote. This is Papua, East Nusa Tenggara, the Malukus, and also this is the western part of the Sumatra Island, where we have we call it the Bukit Barisan, the mountainous area, which is on this part of the island. So this is also people that doesn't really where the inclusion gap is. For the West Java, for the island of Java, you can see that mostly in areas, this is the western tip of Java. This is probably the national park. That's why it has more inclusion gap compared to the other areas in Java. And the green part is basically the big cities where they have well smaller inclusion gap compared to the other area in Java. So from that, I try to see the characteristic of the people that that falls into that categories. So people, and I'm using two categories that is at the extreme is the one is people who can afford but not using internet, and on the other side is using internet but cannot afford, meaning they spend more to use internet, spend more than 10% of their total spending. And as you can see, people that can afford but not using it is relatively older compared to the people who spend more to use the internet. And in terms of gender, 52% are actually female who can afford the internet but not using it. But on the other side, it's mostly 50%, 55% is male. Um, and I try to see what are they doing. The people that falls into this category, 36% is working, and 10% is in school for the people who can afford but not using internet. But for the people who use internet but cannot afford it or spend more for the internet is bigger in terms of 54% are actually people are working and 20% are people in school. And further down, I tried to see from the survey from this group of people who can afford internet but not using it. They only have access to bank account. Either they own the own a bank account, or the family owns a bank account. Only 16% they have access to financial services through banking. And people who are using it but cannot afford it, they have bigger access to banking, 43%. So uh, what are the from this the index, the result from the index and the characteristics of the people, we can see that there are still a lot of potentials to grow into. For instance, people with access to bank accounts. Currently, the average number is only 31% in Indonesia. That means still 70% without access to bank accounts, but maybe require or need of financial services. So this is the room that the economy can grow into. And secondly, people who uses internet, currently the average number is around 40%. Still, that means still 60% without access to internet. Uh, Maybe they don't have in terms of the infrastructure, the facilities, or maybe they still don't have the need for internet because they think uh, things can be done the traditional way. And what's more interesting in Indonesia is actually uh, the uh, the social assistance program for the poor is actually using mobile phones, and that's as a way to substitute the uh, for people who doesn't have access to bank accounts, or maybe they call it something like the branchless banking. So this is even though they don't have bank account, they don't have living in remote areas, they can use the mobile phones to actually as a way to receive uh, the the financial transfer for financial assistance. uh, this is can be in terms of probably the what do you call it, uh, the verification of the number of the financial assistance that they will receive. They just have to show it, come to the government office, and then they will receive the money. So from this, probably the biggest takeaway is that when we're talking about the potential and the infrastructure for moving into uh, micro, small, and medium enterprise financing in Indonesia, the potential is there. There are still room that room or potential that hasn't been utilized or hasn't been explored. And if we're talking about the looking at it at the grassroots level, even uh, for the poor income groups, we can see that the basic infrastructure for uh, MSME financing is there at the very basic level, using mobile phones to receive, financial transfer from the government. So this is something that that Indonesia uh, can can explore the potential when Indonesia move towards the expanding the MSMEs financing, uh, especially for small businesses, unbankable businesses, businesses in the remote areas, um, and provide more positive impact to the economy. As we all know, since the pandemic, across the country, Indonesia, the economy slowed down. However, one of the big the activities that kept the economy rolling is actually uh, the SMEs MSMEs activities, the smaller businesses that uses digital technology, uh, and that sort of help the Indonesian economy, uh, and they have quite a large growth in terms of the economic growth from contribution to the economy. So it is something that that is a big potential for Indonesia, especially in terms of developing how digital financing for MSMEs can provide more, more benefits, more support for the smaller businesses in Indonesia. So that's probably what I see the potential for moving into digital financing for MSMEs in Indonesia. However, the challenge is also great. Uh, you personally, I see the challenge not only in terms of how to make this work at the grassroots level and how can the government help this move forward, you know,
into,
provide the
okay, great.
regulation or the mechanism, but also how to shift the mindset of the people. Usually, people that is working on MSMEs, they have a very traditional mindset. Uh, some have moved into digital transaction, but still a large number are sticking to the traditional ways of doing businesses, using cash, using uh, not uh, not utilizing enough in terms of the financial services and the digital technology. So that's probably my what I have from the Indonesia Internet Inequality Index, and hopefully this can provide what you call a background information on how we move forward for developing the digital financing for MSMEs in Indonesia. So thank you, Maylin, and uh, I'm sorry if I go quickly on the presentation. Hopefully, if you have any question or comments, please do. I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bastian. I would like to actually invite Wolfgang to just make a few remarks about the overall Internet Inequality Index on a global level, because I think it could be quite interesting. Go
Sure,
ahead,
and
Wolfgang.
thank you again, Maylin, for making this all work and bringing everything together. So 3 points. One is really nice to see that some of this core overall approach seems to be applicable. And obviously we still had in the last year this more experiment, and there's obviously internet inequality, those who use it, those who don't use it, those who can afford it, those who can't afford it, but also as we then zoomed in on just internet poverty to make it simpler and even clearer to think of those who cannot afford it. How many are they? And I think we could even think about Bastian in a little extension to understand how many of the, I think 26 million, 46 million that we had in Indonesia, where there are but I think your maps do that already. So, but now, as I said in the chat, now I hope there's a chance to make this more systematic or continuous, and then we can refine also on demography, as some of the comments have been mentioned. Second, and I come to demography at the end again. What we have put, what we emphasized a lot also when we launched it, there's also a video for those of you who didn't join, is just think of it, in the big numbers, right? There's 700 million people who are extremely poor. There's 2 billion people who have below $5, and most of the internet poor among this group. How do you end internet poverty? One is either you have more money. In the US, internet is expensive, but everybody can afford it, so it doesn't matter in that sense, although it does some from the lower end. But in Germany, it's less expensive, where million is now. Germany and the US have, again, the same number of internet poverty, but the price doesn't matter that much. The price does matter between India and Indonesia. India is cheaper than Indonesia. Kenya is cheaper than South Africa. You can end internet poverty if you bring prices down, and that's one big message. And the prices are different among similar countries. They're not just, it's not just that poor countries are always more expensive or vice versa, but they're quite different within the same group. And if, say, South Africa would adopt Kenya prices, or all of Africa would adopt Kenya prices, you would have, I think, 50 million less internet poor. If everybody could adopt India prices, then I think you would have 500 million less internet poor. And that's somehow something I think this group can also push. It's hard to get rich, there's a long-term process, but to become cheap, that's possible. And I think that pressure on getting prices low is important. And then last point on building on these nice comparisons that Bastian did now, which, you have people who, quote unquote, can't afford it, but still use it because it's really essential, and they may then spend more than 10% as we had, or they may then just partly during the month. There's, I'm sure, a lot of interesting gray areas, as I put in the chat. I remember Michael Joseph in Kenya always said with great pride to tell me 20% of my clients never make a phone call. And I says, how is this possible? He says they receive phone calls. And so there's a lot of other nuances in that element. But the key thing is, and we don't have to debate the 10%, we can also put 5% as an illustration. But the method, the model is consistent. So it's consistent across time and space. If somebody wants to put 2 gigabytes or 3 gigabytes per month, or 5% only, we can do that. But what is interesting as a last point, because I think you had one of you, and I think it was either you, Kevin, or Bruce in the chat, that there are, there's two sets of people, and I think Bastian outlined this kind of two things. To those who really, especially younger generation, maybe more remote areas, peri-urban, who are too poor to have the internet access they need. And that is obviously a big development challenge. And then there's a less of a challenge, those who really have the resources but don't use it, which again, I think they're subsets. Some could be just pure infrastructure, but some has to do, at least from the early data, look this with age. That's a classic case. I think that's why Italy has an interesting inequality index dynamic, that a lot of people everybody can afford it, but many don't use it, which is more old women don't use it, which I think that's, or old people don't use it. And among the old, there's more women, put it that way, again, to make this properly. That's why I think also you have a gender split, which I think is much more an old age split. And again, you can test it with the countries that have more skewed demographics and early male mortality. But yeah, those are my additions, also show how this can be expanded. But thanks again so much to PCI and Mei-Lin for jumping on this train and supporting it, and having the Indonesia application now.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mei-Lin. And Bastian, I wanted to say that you thought you covered a lot of material very quickly. I would say that your pacing was exemplary, right? For what you covered. We have people who not only present a lot, but their speech is rushed. Your pace is quite good for an international audience. So thank you so much. Our format is to entertain questions, and then we have overtime from the bottom of the hour to the top of the next hour. So Bastian, Wolfgang, if you can stay with us, we'd greatly appreciate you doing that. So the first person who is quite active in chat, along with Mei-Lin, was Guy Huntington. So Guy, let's have you up first with your questions and comments.
Hi, everyone. Hang on, let me unmute myself. I'm still in my pajamas. I asked a whole bunch of dumb questions, Bastian, in your presentation. And I wanted to see, I'm gonna go back to the first one.
Yeah, pick the top one that you want to ask, and then we'll circle back to you, Guy.
I really wanted to figure out about kids and access to internet. So a lot of kids around the planet don't have access to internet, especially at home. And to me, it's a real big thing because I want to change learning structures around the planet. And that requires basically having internet access in the home and then in the schools. So the dumb questions I was asking in the chat were, you know, how many of these people are below age of consent who don't have access to the internet? How many of them are in the home and how many of them are in the school? How many schools have access to the internet and how many don't? I don't expect you guys to have numbers at the tip of your fingers, but that's the kind of thoughts I was looking for. Over to you.
Yes, I think that is something that is very interesting, especially after the pandemic, because Indonesia is mostly, you know, schools in the last 2 years are done, you know, virtually. People, for instance, like before the pandemic, probably in each of the household, they only have like 1 or 2 computers. Now, if they have 3 kids, they have to have at least, you know, 3 computers or 3 gadgets because they go to school, you know, at the same time. So I think that is something that the numbers right now, I can come back to you and try to work out the numbers, but that's the pre-pandemic era. But for the post-pandemic, have to see when our statistic agency, produce the numbers. They're still working on it right now, I think.
Another follow-on question, then I'll shut up and let anybody else talk, is I want to ask you about people who have cell phone access but can't afford the internet costs. Do you have any numbers on that in Indonesia?
In Indonesia, the average, hold on, let me see the presentation.
Maybe Bastian, while you check, let me do one thing. Just Guy, again, the numbers we can calculate, but just give you a broad ballpark. We have the numbers for all the, also on income poverty or distribution. And so, as you know, there's roughly 700 million people who live in extreme poverty. But if you add a bit, a broader definition, $5 a day, then you get all roughly 2 billion people, roughly 2 billion. And roughly of these 2 billion people, more than a third are children. Children are on balance more in poverty than adults, as we all know, it's everywhere. But also the number of children as a share of the world population is going down. And so you get a double trend, but it's roughly a third. If we were assuming that same that we had, then it would be that comes down to the 500 million number that I would just made a very back of the envelope assumptions, but it may again vary across countries. And I think your question is excellent because then you can nuance and have more specific intervention. In some cases could just be, you know, as you said, that school internet provision is some key element, and maybe some countries have good school systems but a bad internet policy. Others are the opposite, and then one can calibrate the interventions accordingly.
Exactly. Way to go, you guys. Keep going.
Okay, very good.
Bastian, you were checking, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the average, for people who, hold on, for people who use internet but cannot afford or spend more than 10% of their total spending on for internet is quite low actually. It's only 3% in Indonesia. So most people, you can say almost all can actually afford.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Doug Hoolan, you were vocal in chat too. Please join us.
Yeah, and Cassie, I appreciate you comment on the 1 gigabyte per month, and I think it was 10 megabits per second. I think is what the definition you had of internet. Here in the United States, they're defining 25 megabits downlink. I think 3 up is now the new definition. Bandwidth requirement. I don't know if they have a gigabyte. I should look that up of what they're doing. and that I saw some earlier data. Now it's a couple years old, but it's like in Africa, 45% of people had 2G. They were using 2G internet service with GSM, and then another 45% I think were using 3G UMTS service. So think of how limited you'd be using 1990s technology, right? And either on a computer or the internet or technology in general. So, these are going to be some of the challenges I see as, both, raw numbers and then digging into details and how do, like each application, immersive education needs higher bandwidth, text messaging needs less. Okay. And so these are some of the challenges I see. And then I guess my other comment would be on, just what value people get, right? There were some studies earlier that said for every, I think it was 10% increase in the number of mobile users in a country, you get I think it was like a 1% GDP increase in that country. So, there's, the reason we use the internet is because we get benefit, either personally, professionally, or, from a business perspective, economic perspective. And I'm a big believer in sustainability, and the greenest mile you can travel is the one you travel virtually, like we're doing here. And, I believe that the only way we're going to go to net emissions is to start doing virtual travel. My initial thoughts, but I appreciate it.
Great, Doug. I hope some. I'm not sure if Bastian is his crowd is on the Liverpool side, but this is as a German coach. But just in a more seriously, thank you, Doug. And if you have any other references or let us know, we actually there's an academic paper also in preparation. We have a lot of strong references. That there's all empiric references, both on the 1 gigabyte and on the 10 megabit per second. And sometimes, obviously, if you have surveys, we need to also treat them with care, because maybe there's more people using it, but it's just in a fewer numbers of devices. Our logic was, again, we use the global definition of poverty, which is different than the definition in the US or in Germany. But if we use somehow something that's more standard in the US, you would get 95%. You don't get any variance in Africa, and that's why you use this concept of minimum needs. It's not watching soccer or watching Netflix, but it is doing emails, having only 40 minutes a day access is really the bare minimum, as it is the bare minimum to live on $1.90. So, but we can always, it's easy to say let's to make gigabytes, 3 gigabytes, and then see what the numbers.
Yeah, I actually put in the chat. I follow this one group, We Are Social. They every quarter they publish the state of the internet that I thought is very good. And the thing I like about that site is, I don't know if you know it, but they follow, they try to be consistent over time. So like there's different ways of measurement, but just as long as you're consistent, you can see trends. How people use social media, how people do things with business, and so forth. But like one of the statistics I saw was like people in the Philippines use 11 hours of internet a day, which I still don't know how they get to that, since but here in the United States it's about 7 hours a day, and for various activities. And I guess I worked for Motorola and Nokia for 33 years. So this is my background. And I'm working on immersive education and healthcare technology. And, the question is, what use cases do people use this technology, and how will it benefit their lives, right? Either personally or professionally. And, and how do we give abundance for everyone? I'm a big believer that, if we grow the physical economy by a factor of 2, we're going to grow greenhouse gas emissions. There's no way around it. But if we grow the digital economy by a factor of 10, we can have an improvement in everyone's life and yet still lower our carbon footprint. So that's kind of the world I'm working towards. But yes, we absolutely have to get equality on the internet. It's the electricity of the 19th century and the 20th century. We now, the internet is as valuable as electricity was to the world in the 20th century.
Thanks, Doug. All right, so we have reached the bottom of the first hour, and as is our practice, we'll thank everyone who was with us. All right, and we'll continue for overtime for the second half hour for those of you who'd like to stay with us. Again, Bastian, thank you so much for being with us as our guest. Observation as we go into the second half hour, you were talking about the constraints that are associated with use, that some people have less than an hour a day to use their internet connection. And my comment that those constraints are creating m-commerce, ease of use advances, because if you don't have as much time, you need to get through the task as quickly as possible so that you can do as much as you can in your constrained, time frame. So we're seeing a lot of advances in places that have constrained bandwidth, that it's making it easier for everyone, who is banking using a mobile device to do so because of the constraints in, low bandwidth, places that have less time access. So I'm going to read from Richard, who is not with us. He had a question. I'll read it. There's a fragment that starts us off, but also younger. These stats on the surface mean older folks don't have the internet or bank, which feels like a sociological effect. After many years, I finally realized my mom, born in the 20th century, was just never going to learn email. After a couple of years, I finally came to accept that. I think we talked a little bit about those, those constraints. In terms of access, and inequality, are you giving some consideration to not only the infrastructure and ability to get onto the internet, but what it means to make it easy enough for larger parts of the population to use it once they're on? Any thoughts there, Bastian? No, we have lost Bastian.
It seems like we've lost Bastian.
I think we did. All right, but
Oh, dear.
maybe he needed to do something. There he comes.
Sorry, my connection wasn't very good. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying that, we talk about internet inequality. One component of that is simply being able to access it at all. The second is, once you have access, is it easy enough to use? Have you looked at any of the associated constraints with people and their ability to use the internet once they're on, and say that in the context of internet literacy?
Unfortunately, that's the limitation of the survey. So
Understood.
I haven't really looked into that. But however, I think in general that would be much of a problem. I think, especially because the younger generation now are using more and more internet, and they are forced to use virtual learning at school.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, they can also, sort of like forcing the parents or the older generation to actually use that. They can, for instance, personally, I also learned some of the things that what Google Classroom can do from my daughters. So, so I think that there is maybe a small impact, but not a major one in terms of the ability to use internet.
Okay, very good. As a fellow researcher, as a result of your inquiry, what new questions were prompted that you would answer in a follow-on set of questions? What did you discover that you are now thirsty to know more about?
I think one of the main challenge for the data in Indonesia is actually in terms of the affordability part of the index. I can only know the relative spending on internet, like 10% of the total spending, but it's the data on the standard quality of internet, like how much do you have to spend to get at least 3G or 4G or 10 megabytes of download speed that is not available currently here. And I think that's also very important, especially in Indonesia, because of the characteristic of the country. The pricing of each of the regions must be very different. So you will have very different numbers in terms of if you're talking about affordability, what is the cost of the internet connection in each of the regions? That must be very different.
All right, very good.
Yeah.
And very interesting. So anyone else have any questions before we get to the top of the hour? Let me just go around. Bill, Palo Alto, Bill Dahl, any questions for Bastian? Barry Gleason?
This is fascinating. The data is just really interesting, and I want to say thank you. No questions.
All right, very good. Doug, any additional questions from your neck of the woods?
No, just it was a very good presentation, and I appreciate the dialogue. It was, just appreciate you bringing this presentation to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me thank Casey Komlowski, as always, for helping support these calls, opening us up, technically making sure that our recording and presentations are working well. Casey, you always do a great job there. Maylin, let me turn it over to you for concluding remarks, and my thanks to Bastian for being with us.
Thank you, Kevin, for superb moderation as always. Bastian, we've been so proud to have you as our PCI fellow, and this presentation is the culmination of a great engagement with us. Really happy for people to see what an amazing country Indonesia is. I thought the fun facts piece was really wonderful, but also, as you showed the subnational internet factors, people could see, wow, Java has 100 million people. It's divided into all these tiny pieces. It's great for more of us to know more about Indonesia. And I've been very, very impressed by basically the entrepreneurial spirit in Indonesia. And I believe there are at least 4 unicorns, but there may be more now. It's really, we expect to see great things out of Indonesia. And I think the people of Indonesia are going to be coming up with those mobile commerce applications that may help more people access the internet without needing so much bandwidth. So thank you, Bastian. It's been a delight to have you as our PCI fellow.
Thank you, Maylin, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and have a great couple of weeks ahead. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on our next PCI community call. Cheers.
Thank you, Kevin. Bye, everyone.
Bye.